Emily Carter had always believed the sky was her true home. Ever since she was a little girl, she would run outside whenever she heard the roar of engines overhead, her eyes lifted toward the clouds while others stayed busy with life on the ground. At 18 years old, she was already an aviation student and the youngest trainee in her flight academy. She had spent hundreds of hours in simulators, learning every alert sound, every switch, every emergency code a cockpit could throw at her. But today she wasn't in a simulator, she wasn't even in a classroom. Today she was finally living her dream, traveling abroad on a real jet. It was the first international journey of her life. Dubai to London, the aircraft, a massive Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a giant of the skies. When she boarded the plane, she walked down the aisle with the wide-eyed excitement of a child stepping into a fairy-tale castle. She gently touched the seatbacks as if she were greeting the aircraft itself. This wasn't just a metal machine to her. Airplanes were her passion, her future, her destiny. She chose a window seat near the wing. The wing, she always loved watching it cut through the clouds. Outside, the sun glowed over Dubai, turning the airport runway into a shimmering mirror. Emily buckled in, her heart racing not with fear but with eagerness. A trip thousands of miles across continents, a journey through time zones, flying at a height where mountains looked small and oceans endless. It felt like freedom, the engine's word to life, deep and smooth. As the plane accelerated, she watched the ground sweep away faster and faster until the wheels lifted, and suddenly they were weightless. The skyscrapers shrank, the desert faded into gold and white, and soon the plane pierced through soft layers of clouds. Emily smiled, whispering to herself, one day, I'll be the one flying. The cabin was peaceful at first. Passengers talked softly. A baby giggled, flight attendants rolled carts with the smell of fresh tea and meals. Clouds floated like cotton right outside her window. Emily relaxed, letting the calm air wrap around her like a blanket. But nature has its own plans. 3 hours into the flight, the weather turned. The first sign was a gentle shake, a vibration that ran through the floor. Emily felt it immediately. She knew turbulence like a familiar rhythm. At first she didn't worry. Air pockets come and go, she told herself. But then, bang, lightning flashed outside, bright enough to turn the whole sky white for a moment. The plane jolted sharply. Luggage compartments rattled. People gasped. The seatbelt sign dinged loudly above them. Emily's hand gripped the armrest. Her pilot brain switched on, analyzing every shift. She noticed the wing flexing harder than normal, the wind dragging the plane sideways, the clouds thickening into dark, swirling walls. A little girl behind her began to cry. Her mother whispered soothing words, but Emily could hear the fear in her voice too. Then came a sharp, chilling scream, not from the cabin, but from the cockpit. Passengers fell silent. Heads turned as if on cue. Another flash of lightning struck, shaking the plane again. The cockpit door opened suddenly and the co-pilot stumbled out, his face pale, drenched in sweat, gasping for air like he was drowning inside a storm. He shouted something to the crew, but it was drowned by the thunder and the hum of engines. Then his knees gave out. He collapsed right there on the floor, unconscious. Shock spread through the cabin like a wildfire. 2 flight attendants rushed to him, shaking him, calling his name. He didn't respond. Emily's heart dropped into her stomach. She knew exactly what this meant. The pilot is alone in the cockpit. The lead flight attendant sprinted toward the cockpit door, shouting for another crew member. She disappeared inside. For a moment, all Emily could hear was her heartbeat, pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. Seconds felt like hours. Then another scream, louder this time, came from the cockpit. The lead attendant stumbled back into the cabin, her hands trembling, tears already falling. The captain, he's unconscious too, she cried, gasps, whispers, some passengers screamed. Emily's breath froze. Both pilots out, on a plane flying through a storm at 18,000 feet with 211 passengers. It didn't feel real. It felt like the kind of emergency she had trained for, but never imagined witnessing. Alarms began to blare from the cockpit. The aircraft suddenly dropped, a sharp dive, drinks spilled, people shouted, gravity pressed everyone into their seats, a terrifying pull downward. Emily's mind raced with knowledge. Loss of control, autopilot might be failing, turbulence increasing, storm intensifying. Pilots unconscious, no one flying the aircraft. A flight attendant yelled into the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened." Her voice shook, barely holding itself together. The plane jerked again. Even the air felt different, heavier, colder, dangerous. Emily looked around. Panic everywhere. People praying, gripping hands, covering their children's eyes. A man clutched his chest, gasping in fear. She couldn't just sit there. Everything she ever trained for, every dream she ever chased, every reason she loved flying, it all collided in this moment. Her hand rose slowly into the air. Her voice trembled but was clear. "I'm an aviation student. I know how to fly. I can help." The flight attendant stared at her. "Why?" Died desperate, hopeful. There was no time to doubt. "Come with me," she cried, grabbing Emily's arm. Emily stood, legs shaking. The floor beneath her quivered with every roar of the engines. She pushed past terrified passengers and stepped toward the cockpit, a doorway into chaos. Through the narrow hallway she could see flashes of red warning lights, the frantic alarms, the storm pounding against the windshield like angry waves trying to break in. As she crossed that doorway, one thought echoed in her heart: this plane needs a pilot. Even if she was only 18, even if her hands shook, even if fear tried to chain her to the ground, she stepped forward anyway. Because 211 lives were hanging in the air, and she might be the only one who could save them. The cabin was no longer a place of comfort. It had become a cage suspended in a raging storm. The oxygen felt thinner, the lighting turned harsh and flickering. The walls themselves seemed to tighten around the terrified passengers. Flight attendants rushed up and down the aisle, voices trembling, trying to maintain order but barely able to steady their own legs as the aircraft suddenly dropped hundreds of feet in mere seconds. People screamed, drinks splashed, overhead bins shook violently as if they would burst open. Prayers filled the air in countless languages. Mothers shielded their children. Elderly passengers clutched the armrests until their knuckles turned white. Some squeezed their eyes shut as if darkness might protect them from the chaos around. Amid all the panic, Emily's heart hammered against her ribs like a frantic drum, each beat echoing a warning she couldn't ignore. She could feel the engines groaning beneath the fuselage, struggling against the pounding wind. And she knew that without a pilot at the controls, the Boeing 787 would not remain in the sky for long. For one terrifying moment, she considered staying silent, remaining a passenger like everyone else. But deep inside her, courage and instinct roared louder than fear itself. She stood, her knees shaking so badly she could barely support her weight, and raised her voice. "I know how to fly." She gasped, though her throat felt tight and dry. I can help." Her words cut through the confusion around her like a guiding beacon. A flight attendant spun toward her, eyes wide with desperation and disbelief. But there was no time to think, no time to question. "Come," the attendant shouted, grabbing Emily's wrist and pulling her forward before doubt could drag her back into her seat. The aisle felt impossibly long, the screams behind her fading as she was dragged toward the heart of the emergency, the cockpit where fate was waiting to test her. Her footsteps slipped with each violent shake of the aircraft, and once she nearly fell, but the attendant kept pulling her onward, whispering, "Please, please know what you're doing." As if the hope of everyone on board had been pinned onto this one terrified teenager, Emily's breath grew shallower with every step toward the sealed cockpit door. Her mind flooded with memories of long nights studying flight manuals, practicing emergency procedures in simulators, listening to instructors repeating, "The moment you step into the cockpit, you are responsible for every soul on board." She had laughed then, thinking it was dramatic. Now it was horrifyingly real. With a heavy metallic click, the cockpit door opened, and she was thrust into a world she had only dreamed of. Flashing control panels lit in relentless shades of red and amber, warning sounds beeping faster and louder than her pulse. The smell of burnt electronics and ozone filled the cramped space. The captain lay slumped against his harness, completely unconscious, his headset dangling uselessly from one ear. The co-pilot lay on the floor, pale as paper, unresponsive. For a heartbeat, Emily froze her brain, refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. 2 trained pilots were down, and she was the only one left between control and catastrophe. A flight attendant's trembling hand pushed her closer to the captain's seat. "You can do this," she whispered, though her voice broke halfway through. Emily lowered herself into the command chair, the seat where legends sat, where heroes guided millions through skies, where responsibility felt as heavy as gravity itself. The control yoke felt cold in her shaking palms, and the sight of the complex panels before her nearly stole the breath from her lungs. She had studied Boeing cockpits, but sitting in one during a real emergency was nothing like sitting in a simulator on a sunny afternoon. A violent blast of wind slammed the side of the aircraft, buttons flickered. The plane tilted sharply sideways, and Emily's head smacked against the headrest as she grabbed the yoke to steady herself. She forced a shaky breath into her lungs. Focus. Wasn't this what you always wanted? Wasn't flying your dream? Yes, but this wasn't a dream, this was survival. Suddenly a burst of static screeched through the cockpit speakers, then a commanding voice cut through the storm. "Attention, flighty. K921, we have lost your transponder stability. Who is flying that aircraft? Respond immediately." Emily's heart twisted. Air traffic control, the ground, the professionals who expected a trained captain to answer, not a trembling 18-year-old aviation student. Her fingers fumbled for the radio transmit button, and when she finally pressed it, her voice came out small, timid, cracking with fear. This is a student pilot," she said, swallowing hard as every word trembled out of her. "Both pilots are unconscious. I need your help." There was silence on the other end, just static and the terrifying groans of the engines fighting the storm. Emily feared they didn't hear her, or worse, didn't believe her. But then a calmer voice returned, firmer, slower, like someone trying to prevent panic from spreading. "Copy that. Student pilot, listen to me carefully. You are not alone. We are going to help you bring that airplane down safely. First, take control of the aircraft. Hold the yoke gently. Do you hear me? Gently?" Emily nodded, forgetting they couldn't see her. She tightened her grip slightly, adjusting her posture in the seat. Her hands were trembling so much that her fingers slipped on the throttle knobs. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with her sleeve, drew in a shaky breath, and tried again. Her hand curled around the yoke with just enough strength to keep it steady, but not enough to jerk it. Outside, the view was terrifying, massive storm clouds swirling violently, lightning slicing across the sky like white hot blades, rain smashing against the windshield with the fury of 1,000 needles. The aircraft shook again, lights dimmed then flickered back. The altitude monitor showed numbers dropping too fast. 18,700 ft, 18,500 ft, 18,300 ft. Emily squeezed her eyes shut for a second, willing herself not to break. She forced her voice into the radio again, this time stronger, louder. "I'm in the seat, I have the controls." She breathed out the fear, inhaled determination. "Tell me what to do next." Her entire body trembled, but something inside her shifted, a transformation born of necessity. She wasn't just Emily anymore. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the pilot now. Behind her, 211 lives hung in the balance. People she had never met, children who hadn't yet lived life, parents who only wanted to return home, grandparents who thought they'd already survived the worst of life, were counting on her. The responsibility crashed down on her shoulders like the weight of the entire sky, and yet she didn't back down. Outside, lightning illuminated her face for a split second, casting her in a heroic glow, a young woman at war with the heavens. And for the first time in her life, she understood what courage truly was. Not the absence of fear, but the strength to move forward despite it. Emily's fingers curled tightly around the controls, knuckles turning pale as she tried to steady her breath. The cockpit felt as if it was shaking apart, every panel vibrating, every alarm screaming danger. Red lights, amber warnings, and sharp beeps filled the space like a battlefield of machines. Outside, the world was nothing but chaos. Rain didn't just hit the windshield, it attacked it, racing downward in streaks so thick she could barely see anything but swirling darkness. Thunder roared like a hungry beast surrounding the aircraft, and lightning carved blinding cracks into the sky, revealing monstrous storm clouds spinning in every direction. The radio crackled again. ATC voice strained but steady. "Stabilize altitude." "Emily, gently pull the yoke. Do it now." Heart pounding like a relentless drum, Emily eased back on the control column. Her hands were trembling, but she controlled the motion with every ounce of training buried in her memory. The aircraft gasped, jolted, then the descent slowed, and finally, the Boeing 787 leveled out at 18,000 feet. She heard cheering muffled through the cockpit door, passengers celebrating their first moment of hope. But Emily didn't turn around. She couldn't. Her eyes stayed locked ahead. Her mission wasn't over, not even close. The storm wasn't letting them go so easily. Winds hit the aircraft sideways, slamming it like waves crashing into a ship at sea. Emily gritted her teeth, adjusting the rudder pedals with shaky feet to keep the nose straight. More lightning streaked across the sky. One bolt struck so close it lit up the cockpit with searing white light. A deafening crack followed, and the entire airplane jerked violently, alarms instantly escalating, wind shear warning, pull up, pull up. Sweat drenched Emily's palms, her breathing sped up. She could almost feel the fear of every passenger flowing toward her like a heavy force pressing against her back. But ATC voice returned, firm and grounding. "Emily, listen to me. Stay focused. You are flying a Dreamliner. She wants to stay in the air. Trust the aircraft. Trust yourself." Emily swallowed hard, her lips trembling, but she nodded silently, finding strength inside the chaos. Her gaze dropped to the monitors. Fuel levels were blinking low. The storm had forced major detours, burning more fuel than expected. They did not have time for mistakes. "We're close to London," ATC continued, "but visibility is near zero. We'll guide you straight to the runway. Follow every instruction, okay." Emily forced the word out, barely audible, "okay." Her voice cracked, but her spirit held. The radios filled with new direction, headings, altitude changes, approach speeds, rapid commands she had studied for years, but never expected to execute alone on a real Boeing jet. She responded to each one, sometimes with hesitation, sometimes with instinct. But each time she executed correctly. She could feel the aircraft responding gradually, slowly, like it was allowing her to take command. The descent began. Emily eased the yoke forward. The Dreamliner's nose tilted downward, slicing into thicker, darker clouds. Turbulence became more violent. The plane rattled like it was being shaken by a giant. The lights flickered, casting shadows across the unconscious pilots' faces. Emily glanced at them, once two professionals with decades of experience, now helpless, while a teenager fought for them all. She clenched her jaw. "Don't think about that, fly." ATC voice came again. "You're doing great, Emily. Keep the descent steady. Reduce throttle to maintain speed. You've trained for this. You belong here." Those words hit her heart with emotional weight. For the first time since the crisis began, she truly believed them. The altimeter ticked downward. 14,000 FT, 12,000 FT, 10,000 FT. Every drop in altitude tightened the storm around them. Winds howled like sirens, buffeting the aircraft side to side so aggressively that the wings strained and flexed. Emily's body rocked with each hit, but she refused to let go of the controls. Her breathing became slow and calculated, just like she'd practiced in simulators. She repeated in her mind, "Steady hands, calm heart, focus." Rain roared louder. sounding like thousands of stones pelting the aircraft. The forward visibility dropped to nothing, just blackness and streaks of water. Her entire landing would rely on instruments, ATC guidance, and pure willpower. "Emily," ATC said, slower now, voice full of belief, "you are going to land this airplane. You are saving 211 lives. Don't look down, don't look back, just fly." Emily blinked away tears that burned behind her eyes. She didn't want them to fall, not now, not when every sense needed to be awake. Her hand adjusted the throttle, her other hand on the yoke, her feet controlling the rudders, her eyes locked between speed, altitude, and flight path indicators. This was flying, not peaceful skies, not clear horizons, but fighting the most dangerous forces in the world with human courage. 5,000 feet, 4,000 feet. The cabin behind her went silent. No one dared breathe too loudly. The realization spread they were nearly there, nearly home. Emily's ears popped from pressure changes, but she ignored it. Another warning flashed, low fuel, glowing like a threat. They might only have one chance to land. If she missed the runway, there would be no second approach. Emily's pulse thudded harder, a constant reminder that every heartbeat counted. The runway lights should have been visible by now, but the storm refused to part. Outside still looked like a wall of night. Emily pressed her lips together, eyes darting to the GPS approach indicator. ATC voice guided gently. "You are lined up perfectly. Continue descending, trust your instruments." She did. Because trusting them meant trusting herself. 3,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 1,500 feet. Suddenly, another violent lightning strike, so bright it was blinding, shook the plane from nose to tail. Emily gasped, gripping the controls tight enough to hurt. The aircraft tipped harshly to the left. Passengers screamed again, but Emily reacted faster than her fear, correcting the roll with swift counter inputs. Her instructor's voice echoed from memory. "The aircraft listens to confidence." She steadied it. The engines roared, pushing back against the wind. ATC returned. "Emily, deep breath. You're doing great." She inhaled slowly, deeply. Her chest lifted. Her hands calmed. 1,000 feet, landing gear. ATC ordered. Emily flipped the lever, clunk, the gear deployed beneath them, vibrating through the cockpit floor. 800 feet, 600 feet, flaps full. ATC commanded again. Emily's fingers moved automatically, training guiding her where consciousness struggled. 300 feet, the storm was still thick, no ground in sight. ATC whispered now, as if the whole world was holding breath. "Trust yourself, Emily, you're a pilot, bring us home." Emily's eyes burned with determination. She tightened her grip, but her heart softened, filled with courage she never knew she had. She could feel every soul behind her, silent, hoping, praying. She wasn't just flying a plane anymore. She was carrying lives, dreams, families, futures, asterisk, asterisk. A responsibility she accepted without hesitation. She lowered the nose ever so slightly. Her final descent had begun. Every heart on that aircraft seemed to freeze at the same moment, suspended between fear and hope as the Boeing 787 sliced through the final stretch of suffocating clouds. The passengers held their breath, gripping armrests, clutching loved ones, whispering prayers into trembling hands. The cabin lights flickered, shadows dancing like ghosts on the walls with every shake of the aircraft. Outside, nothing could be seen, not the city below, not the ground rising to meet them, only darkness and storm, as if the sky itself refused to let them go. In the cockpit, Emily locked her gaze on the altitude indicator, her pulse matching its downward numbers. 400 feet, 201. Her heart hammered so hard she feared it would drown out ATC final instructions. The aircraft rocked aggressively from side to side, like a giant hand was trying to shove them off alignment. Emily clenched the yoke, sweat dripping from her forehead, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. She had been holding the controls for so long that her arms felt like they were made of fire. But she refused to let go, not now, not when the ground was within reach. The storm unleashed one final blow. A violent gust of wind slammed against the metal body of the jet, jolting it with a force that threw even the strongest passengers into cries of panic. The nose began to drift, just inches, but inches could mean missing the runway. Emily fought back, teeth gritted, pouring every ounce of strength, training, fear, love, courage she had ever carried into that one moment. She corrected the drift perfectly, now or never. She eased back the yoke just slightly, guiding the nose upward, holding it steady, letting the wheels search blindly for the ground that none of them could see. And then boom, the main landing gear struck the runway, bouncing once, then again, before gripping the wet concrete with a roar of rubber and friction. Screams burst through the cabin, terrified at first, then transforming into unstoppable cheers when the realization hit. The plane was down. Emily pushed the reverse thrusters, hands shaking but precise. Engines thundered, spraying mist into the storm, slowing the colossal 787 down the slick runway. 90 knots, 70, 40, 20, the aircraft finally crawled to a complete stop, and then silence, dead, echoing silence. The silence of shock, of relief so heavy that breath itself had weight. Emily leaned back in the captain's seat, gasping, her whole life's dreams compressed into these final, unbelievable seconds, and tears broke free, streaking down her face. Behind her, a moment later, cries erupted not of fear, but of pure gratitude. Passengers rose from their seats, sobbing, hugging strangers, holding their children tight. "She saved us," someone whispered. "An angel, she saved us." The flight attendants rushed into the cockpit, tears falling as they touched Emily's shoulder like she was a miracle made of real flesh. "You did it," one choked out, barely able to speak. "She did." The emergency crew arrived within minutes, flashing lights cutting through the storm, paramedics storming into the aircraft, attending first to the unconscious pilots who were swiftly evacuated to waiting ambulances. Doctors assured Emily that they would survive, and hearing that lifted a weight off her heart she didn't even know she was holding. Soon they escorted Emily out of the cockpit, down the aisle lined with the faces of 211 souls who would remember this night forever. People reached out to touch her hands, whispering blessings, crying, thanking her in every language. Phones captured every step she took, blurry images of a trembling, drenched teenager who had just defied death in the sky. When the cabin door finally opened, a wall of cold air hit her. Then the blinding flashes of cameras from journalists, news media, airport staff, all waiting in awe. Reporters shouted questions, but Emily heard nothing. Her ears rang with the storm still roaring inside her. She stepped onto the wet runway, her legs threatening to collapse beneath her, her gaze lifting to the aircraft she had just landed. A Boeing 787, one of the largest aircraft on Earth, brought safely home by an 18-year-old girl who wasn't even licensed to fly one. Tears sparkled in her eyes as she tried to process the magnitude of what she had done. She looked back at the passengers pouring out behind her, families reunited, lives spared, dreams saved because she stood up when fear tried to silence her. ATC officers approached her, one placing his hand gently over hers. "You didn't just land a plane tonight," he said softly, voice full of reverence. "You became a pilot." Emily broke into tears again, not of fear this time, but of overwhelming pride and relief. News headlines around the world would soon call her the youngest hero of the skies, the girl who saved 211 lives, the bravest passenger in aviation history. But in her heart, Emily knew the truth. She was just a girl who loved airplanes, a girl who refused to let fear win, a girl who proved that courage doesn't wait for permission. As dawn slowly pushed the storm away and the first rays of sunlight painted the runway gold, Emily stood there, soaked, exhausted, shaking, yet stronger than ever. She had faced the sky at its worst, and she had conquered it. 211 hearts beat today because hers refused to quit. And that night, Emily Carter didn't just walk away as a survivor, she walked away as a legend. The youngest hero who saved 211 souls from 18,000 feet above the earth. Her journey had just begun